Activation of the adaptive immune system is tightly regulated. Too little or too much inflammation can be detrimental. Though there are exceptions to this rule, full activation of an adaptive immune cell, be that a B cell or a T cell, requires two signals. To better visualize this process, imagine a house with one light and two light switches. To get the light to turn on full brightness, both switches need to be turned to the on position. The first light switch is signal 1. This is the receptor pairing. As was previously mentioned, CD4 T cells have T cell receptors that interact with the peptide fragments bound to MHC, and B cells have B cell receptors that interact with a given specific epitope. Remember that B cells are not limited to proteins and can interact with other antigens like polysaccharides and even inorganic matter. The second switch corresponds to a coactivation signal that B cells and T cells both require. We will begin with T cells. Coactivation of T cells comes from macrophages or dendritic cells. When activated, macrophages express the cell surface ligand B7. The receptor for this is CD28 and is located on T cells. When CD28 and B7 are complexed, this activates the second switch and the T cells can become fully active. Returning to the analogy of a light, if only one of the switches are flipped, there will only be a partial, if any, activation of the corresponding cell. If both switches are turned on, the cell will be activated. Let us now look at the B cell. The first switch still corresponds to the B cell receptor. If the receptor, which is the surface-bound antibody of the B cell, binds to an antigen, the first switch will be turned on. The second switch is the coactivator of the B cell and comes from helper T cells. When active, CD4 T cells make CD40 ligand. B cells have the receptor for this ligand, CD40. When CD40 on B cells is bound to CD40 ligand from T cells, the second switch is active in the B cell. As with the T cells, activating one switch will result in very weak activation. To get full B cell activity, both switches should be turned on. Perhaps the most important purpose of the analogy is to illustrate the switches are independent events. It does not matter what the underlying cause is for activating each switch. If both switches are turned to the on position, the cell will be active. If you find yourself pondering why we care about any of this, I encourage you to watch the video putting it together, conjugates and adjuvants. In this video, we have covered the mechanisms involved in activating the adaptive immune response. In the next video, we will cover the sequence of this activation process, the when and where this occurs in the body.